Ah, the GOP. That grand old party of historical amnesia, now taking its self-inflicted ignorance to new heights by slapping the label DEI on black people as if we're some corporate diversity initiative instead of, the very foundation of civilization. It would be amusing if it weren't so predictable. Because let's be honest, this isn't about policy, economics, or even ideology. This is about erasing black contributions from history, about dismissing centuries of brilliance and innovation as nothing more than some affirmative action experiment gone wrong. The ultimate gaslighting. Well, we're not having it, because if black people are DEI, then civilization itself is DEI. Mathematics, DEI. Writing, DEI. Modern medicine, DEI. The personal computer that GOP politicians use to tweet out their outrage, also DEI. And if we were feeling particularly spicy, we could even argue that Christianity itself is DEI. Because without black people, there would be no Jesus to save their souls in the first place. Let's take a stroll down memory lane and examine just how deep this so-called DEI influence runs. And for the sake of argument, let's do what the GOP wants. Let's imagine a world where black people never contributed to anything. No African influence, no inventions, no discoveries, no culture, no resilience. Just a blank void where, according to certain politicians, civilization would have progressed just fine without us. The first thing to go, writing itself. That's right. Without black people, we wouldn't even be able to record history, because writing was first developed by the Egyptians, who, contrary to Hollywood's decades of propaganda, were not a bunch of pale-skinned, British-accented aristocrats draped in linen. The Greeks themselves, those supposed pioneers of Western thought, admitted as much. Diodorus of Sicily openly wrote that the Egyptians, black Africans, were the ones who invented writing and mathematics. Let that sink in. Without African ingenuity, Pythagoras wouldn't have a theorem to plagiarize, and Newton wouldn't have the mathematical tools to discover gravity. The GOP, of course, would probably still be denying the existence of gravity, but that's another discussion. Then there's iron. Without the ancient metallurgists of Leja, Nigeria, who were smelting iron long before Europeans figured out how to build anything more complex than a wooden fort, there would be no modern tools, no steel, no industrial revolution. That means no cars, no trains, no skyscrapers. If you're reading this on a device with metal components, congratulations, you're benefiting from African technological advancements. And yet, when discussions about the history of metallurgy come up, Africa is mysteriously absent from the conversation, as if iron technology just magically appeared in Europe one day, fully formed, like Athena bursting from Zeus's forehead. And while we're talking about African influence on global development, let's discuss a man named Hannibal Barca. You know, the military genius who nearly brought Rome to its knees by marching his army and elephants across the Alps. Hannibal was black, full stop. And yet Hollywood keeps casting him as some ambiguous Mediterranean dude, because the idea of a black man outsmarting European forces on their own turf is apparently too much for mainstream history to handle. What's truly ironic, though, is that Hannibal's strategic brilliance is still studied in military academies today. Meaning, yes, even the US Army has been indirectly learning from DEI. But let's go bigger. Let's talk about the Moors, those African scholars, warriors, and architects who ruled Spain for 800 years, bringing with them advanced irrigation systems, public street lighting, and the very concept of universities. Before the Moors, Europe was fumbling through the so-called Dark Ages, a period of such impressive backwardness that basic sanitation was considered a luxury. The Moors introduced hygiene, education, and medicine, transforming cities like Cordoba and Granada into intellectual powerhouses that would eventually spark the European Renaissance. And what did Europe do in return? Whitewash their influence, turn them into villains in Shakespearean plays. and then had the audacity to act as if the Renaissance was purely a homegrown European phenomenon. But fine, let's skip ahead a few centuries and look at modern inventions. Surely, if black people are just some modern DEI experiment, there shouldn't be any major contributions to the technological landscape, right? Wrong. Let's start with the personal computer, the very device that allows Republican politicians to log onto Twitter and rant about how black people are ruining America was co-invented by a black man, Dr. Mark Dean. That's right. Without Mark Dean's contributions to the development of the IBM PC, there would be no modern computing as we know it. And yet, how often does he get mentioned in discussions about the history of technology? Instead, we get endless odes to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, while conveniently ignoring the black engineer who helped make it all possible. Then there's Latimer, the man who improved Edison's light bulb by creating a longer-lasting filament. Without him, those glorious GOP fundraising events would be held in the dark, and Tucker Carlson's fear-mongering monologues would have to be delivered by candlelight. And Garrett Morgan, his inventions include the gas mask and the modern traffic signal. So every time a lawmaker safely crosses an intersection without getting T-boned, they owe a debt to a black man. Frederick McKinley Jones revolutionized refrigerated transport, allowing perishable food to be shipped across the country, which means that without him, half of America's grocery stores wouldn't exist. And let's not forget Alexander Miles, who developed the automatic elevator doors, saving people from the charmingly medieval experience of falling to their deaths every time they tried to take a lift. But let's be generous. Let's say, hypothetically, that none of these individual contributions existed. Let's pretend, just for fun, that no black inventors, no African mathematicians, no Moorish scholars ever played a role in shaping the modern world. Even then, we'd still have to deal with the fact that without black labor, stolen, brutalized, and exploited, America as we know it wouldn't exist. The entire economic foundation of the country was built on the backs of enslaved Africans. Cotton, sugar, tobacco. These industries didn't just thrive on their own. They were driven by forced black labor, generating wealth that funded America's infrastructure, banking institutions, and even its early universities. So even if we erase every named black inventor, every scholar, every revolutionary, we're still left with the inescapable reality that black labor built the country that the GOP now insists black people have contributed nothing to. So let's take a deep breath and imagine for a moment where the world would be without all this black influence. No Jesus, no mathematics, no written language, no iron tools, no cars, no trains, no universities, no computers, no modern medicine, no safe elevators, no streetlights, no working traffic signals, no Renaissance, no Industrial Revolution, no America. Just a bunch of people stumbling through the dark, grunting in confusion, wondering why they haven't progressed past the Bronze Age. And what would the GOP be doing in this alternate reality? Probably still finding something to complain about. But instead of whining about DEI, they'd be scratching their heads, trying to figure out why civilization never quite took off. Maybe, just maybe, instead of trying to erase black history, they should take a moment to appreciate that without DEI people, there wouldn't be a civilization to save in the first place. But of course, that would require admitting the truth, something they seem constitutionally incapable of doing. So here we are, watching history repeat itself in the most ridiculous way possible. The people who built the world are being told they don't belong in it. The very minds that shaped modern civilization are being dismissed as diversity hires. And the same folks who are most reliant on black contributions, from the computers they use to the elevators they take, are the loudest voices in pretending those contributions never happened. And yet, despite all this, despite the overwhelming, indisputable, receipts on receipts evidence that black people have been the architects, engineers, and innovators of civilization itself, the GOP still clings to the absurd fantasy that we're just here because of DEI. The irony. The only real diversity initiative in history was the one that let mediocre white men fail upward for centuries, while standing on the shoulders of the very black geniuses they now dismiss. But hey, maybe they're just mad, because without us, they wouldn't even have a Bible to thumb, a light bulb to keep the lights on, or a functioning computer to type out their next unhinged manifesto. Imagine that, sitting in a dark room, struggling to write on a stone tablet, wondering why their empire never quite got past the 2 sticks and a rock phase. Thanks for watching this episode. Do remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And look out for the next one on Africa's great civilizations.